On Thanksgiving weekend of 1950, a brutally frigid nor'easter storm was battering the coast of Massachusetts and was particularly harsh on the small town of Marblehead near Salem. Beryl Atherton, a 47-year-old elementary school teacher, had 25 years of service under her belt and was home alone with her dog Esky, a white Spitz who was her constant companion. Since the death of her father, Esky was about the only companion she ever kept, and Atherton was a self-described spinster with no close friends or family. It is said that her favorite pastimes was watching old movies, and she would drive to the movie theater in Lynn to catch a show, but always went alone. With the freezing winds lashing at her drab clapboard cottage on Sewell Street, Beryl ran a few final errands before her small town was due to be snowed under. She made a run to the grocery store to pick up vital supplies, including a few extra cans of food for Esky before she took a few bags of garbage out to the trash cans outside her home at around 6 p.m. that Saturday evening. When she did so, she spotted a young neighbor boy watching her from a window of his home. She gave the boy a wave, and this was the last time she was seen for a good few days. As predicted, Marblehead was completely snowed under through the course of Thanksgiving weekend, and it took until Monday, November 27th, for the town to dig itself out and resume normal activities. The town's milkman, known among the locals simply as Pint, called on Miss Atherton's home to deliver her milk. Usually speaking, Pint would just leave a person's milk delivery on their doorstep, but he knew that Miss Atherton was extremely thin and frail at barely 100 pounds and was concerned about her well-being after such a vicious snowstorm. So on this occasion, he actually knocked on Miss Atherton's door to ensure that she was okay. He knocked once, but there was no answer. Then again, but there was still no answer. On a hunch, Pint tried the door handle and found that it was unlocked. He wandered slowly through Miss Atherton's home at first, calling her name, then walked into the kitchen, finding a scene that would take his breath away. Miss Atherton was lying on the floor, face up, in a pool of her own clotted blood, with Esky lying near her body, mewling in a considerable amount of pain. Pint screamed as he fled the house, careening to the home of one of Miss Atherton's neighbors and pleading with them to call the police. When the police arrived, they deduced that Beryl Atherton had been dead for days. On the kitchen tables were her brown paper grocery bags, still full of foodstuff she'd brought home on the last day she'd been seen alive by the curious neighbor boy, meaning that it had been only moments after this encounter that her murderer had pounced, and within maybe an hour of waving to the small boy, Beryl Atherton was lying in a pool of her own blood. She had several broken ribs and bruising around her throat where she appeared to have been strangled so hard that there was still fingernail imprints in her cold, dead flesh. Her killer had then used a small blade to slice her throat, but had done so in a very peculiar manner. Not only had he cut her neck open horizontally, but had also inflicted a dreadful vertical wound from her ribs to her chin, essentially stabbing a cross in her neck. The cuts were so deep that Beryl Atherton had almost been decapitated, and she had bled so heavily from her wounds that her blood vessels were completely exsanguinated. A sample would have to be extracted directly from her heart by the examining coroner. The killer then let himself out of the house, but not before breaking several of little Esky's ribs as the loyal hound tried to avenge his fallen mistress. Infuriatingly, the crime scene was almost completely devoid of any clue as to the identity of Beryl's murderer. There wasn't a single sign of forced entry anywhere on the property. There were no fingerprints on any surface, and no shoe or boot prints on the ground surrounding the house, and despite questioning Beryl's neighbors, no one but the dog Esky had seen the killer in the flesh. If Miss Atherton cried out for help, the severity of the storm would probably have drowned out any urgent pleas of that fateful night. No one in the surrounding neighborhood had heard or seen a thing. Despite the grotesque violence of the scene, there appeared to be few signs of a struggle apart from a broken necklace caused by the impact of the killer's blade, which had also broken during the savage and unprovoked attack. And aside from a few broken fingers that suggested she had tried and failed to defend herself from her attacker, it seemed that he had managed to sneak up on Beryl while she was totally unaware. The crime scene was so lacking in useful evidence that it had been theorized the killer actually hung around for a little while, ensuring there were no fingerprints, fibers, or DNA present. And since the murder took place in Beryl's kitchen, the killer may well have had ample access to cleaning supplies in order to ensure the scene was scrubbed of evidence. Both police and friends were surprised by the fact Miss Atherton kept a diary, which yielded information about a handful of male acquaintances. Those that knew her were completely unaware of such gentlemen, but the information therein offered no help in solving the crime. It was discovered she had been deeply disappointed over a broken love affair, but this proved not to enter into the case either. In the aftermath of Beryl's murder, with police unable to come up with any suspects or clear motives for her killing, the small town of Marblehead became rife with rumors and gossip. Some said Beryl was leading some kind of double life and had become embroiled with organized crime down in Boston that had come back to bite her. Others believe it was a jilted lover from the broken love affair that had sought revenge after Beryl had broken the engagement off, or perhaps a relative who learned of a sizable inheritance that they either wished to access early or were about to be cut off from. Yet her estate only consisted of about $25,000, and no jewelry or other items appear to have been stolen from the house, so it seems that financial gain may not have been the motive. But chillingly enough, there are some living in Marblehead today who claim they know full well who killed Beryl, and a handful who assert that the killer is still alive. Given that the killer might well be up to 80 or 90 years old, it's more than likely they might pass away before ever facing any charges for the murder they committed. And so, it seems that the brutal crime committed that Thanksgiving weekend may forever remain unsolved, and that yet another cold and callous murderer will escape justice, free to walk the streets in the knowledge they committed the worst act a person is capable of and gotten away with it.